It's time for me to watch the 1975 World Series again. It feels almost like some kind of religious rite, almost like it's my duty as a baseball fan. And based on what I've seen, I'm not the only one who feels this way. But there's a difference here. I'm not going to watch the official DVD releases. For one thing, that DVD set has become pretty expensive. But you know, there's another method to my madness. I mean, I've always been a purist. I prefer watching, when possible, the original broadcast with as many of the original commercials as I can find. And fortunately, this time around, I was able to find a copy of every game of the 75 World Series. But you know, before we get to the footage, let's set the stage. Now, you might not remember this, but the Boston Red Sox almost won the American League East back in 1972. The Red Sox went into the last series of 1972 neck and neck with the Detroit Tigers, and it just so happened that their final series was in Detroit. Louis Tiant was the starting and losing pitcher in the second game of that series, which gave first place to the Tigers. Boston wound up in second place in 1973, 8 games behind the Orioles. And Boston had an almost identical record in 1974, but wound up finishing third behind the Orioles and the Yankees. It was no surprise then when the Red Sox were competitive again in 1975. They fought tooth and nail with the Orioles once again. However, disaster struck on September 21st when star rookie Jim Rice was injured. Rice's left hand was broken by a pitch in the second inning of an important game. He was out for the rest of the year. But the Red Sox kept at it, going as far as to play this game against Cleveland on the night of September 26th in the fog. The Red Sox clinched the division the very next day as the Orioles lost a doubleheader. Though the 3-time defending champion Oakland Athletics were favorites in the ALCS, the Red Sox prevailed in 3 straight. Boston looked simply awesome in all 3 games, fielding, running, hitting, and pitching well. It was a series filled with frustration for Oakland. The Red Sox victory was a surprise to most pundits, but it was clear that they had an exceptionally good team. The Cincinnati Reds, meanwhile, were a dynasty. The Reds clinched their division on September 7th, still the earliest any club has clinched in the division era. Cincinnati trounced the Pirates in 3 straight in the NLCS, a series that really wasn't all that close. In hindsight, it seems like fate willed the Reds and the Red Sox to meet up in the 1975 World Series. The Reds had been dominant for years, but this 1975 team felt like something special. Now, the sports landscape back in 1975 was a lot different than it was today. Even those of you who remember 1975 might be surprised when we take a look back. For one thing, the first game of the series was played in the afternoon, something that Major League Baseball hasn't tried since 1987. For another, ABC offered to move its key Michigan State college football game to 3 p.m. Eastern Time to avoid a conflict with the World Series game. That's right, back in those days, football gave way to baseball, especially at World Series time. I found columns like this one from the Detroit Free Press, where Joe Falls notes that he can't remember anything about past Michigan State games, but that he can remember all sorts of stories from old World Series games. I mean, this really was a trip, even for somebody like me who spends a lot of time reading old newspapers. It felt like football was a nuisance or a distraction when it was World Series time. The Sporting News printed an article all about how football on television takes a backseat to the World Series, something I don't think anybody has written since. The Cincinnati Enquirer was filled with pictures of the Reds checking out Fenway Park, particularly the famous Green Monster and left. The Boston Globe, as usual, was filled with grim predictions of a pending loss to the dominant Cincinnati Reds. Some traditions never end, of course. Fans lined up for tickets at Fenway Park days in advance as soon as tickets went on sale. Even the newspaper cartoonists got into the act. The Boston Globe hoped that the plug would be pulled on the Big Red Machine. The Cincinnati Enquirer asked for a Boston Tiant party. And the Enquirer's cartoon staff also predicted that it would be a slow weekend for sketching. One trend we'll almost certainly never see again is the iron-on t-shirt printing in the local papers. I don't think it works well with old newspaper scans. The Cincinnati Enquirer had one too, knocked the socks off. This sort of thing was a trend. I think you could find one in every Saturday newspaper back then. Well, it's a long way away from convincing all the fans to wear the same color at the ballpark, that's for sure. It really makes you feel like fandom has evolved a lot over time. NBC's pregame show was The Baseball World with Joe Garagiola. Joe was a bit of a star in those days. Unlike modern pregame shows, they went straight into championship series highlights, not a lot of useless interviews or other banter. I also don't remember the last time I've seen a pregame TV segment on an umpire. Of course, we don't have any umpires today quite like Ron Luciano. Another difference between this and the modern broadcast is how Dick Stockton took time to introduce Fenway Park before the start of the game. NBC treated this game more like an important event in American news than just another game. Well, in my opinion, the 1975 World Series was the best television World Series of all time. Now, I know that's a really bold thing to say, especially since the camera angles were so basic, there wasn't any HD, and so on. But you know, if you just sit down and watch it, you can't help but be captivated by it. Director Harry Coyle of NBC knew exactly how to turn a baseball game into a fascinating story. Well, I'll save you the pain of sitting through the formal roster introductions, except for the one for Jim Rice, who sadly missed this series. NBC also chose to show the Red Sox warming up before the first inning started, something I don't think you ever see these days. When I came up with the idea for this video, I initially wanted it to be a comparison between this series and a more modern World Series, but that's going to have to wait for later. I mean, after watching this one, I really have a hard time getting myself excited about watching another Fox broadcast. And so it began, Pete Rose hitting against Louis Tiant, who twisted and turned like crazy. Check this one out. This is Tiant's hesitation pitch. Sometimes you wonder who Tiant was looking at in the crowd. Tiant was a fascinating pitcher. He was an all-star with Cleveland back in 1968. He famously posted a 1.60 ERA in that year of the pitcher. He then proceeded to lose 20 games in 1969. Now, this is back when people paid a lot of attention to wins and losses. Tiant, though, was instrumental in helping the Red Sox during their glory years in the 1970s, and it's really fitting that he got the start here. The Reds, meanwhile, put their ace Don Gullett on the mound, but Gullett got into some trouble right off the bat. Denny Doyle bunted Dwight Evans to second base, a little bit conservative in my opinion since it was only the bottom of the first inning. And that brought up the first controversial play of the series. It's obvious that Joe Morgan was interfered with. The Reds got the out of the plate anyway though, so I guess it was moot. Well, that gave fans an idea of the sort of World Series this was going to be. I mean, that sort of play would have been among the most memorable of the 72 to 74 period, or 1970 World Series as well, where the most famous play came from Game 1. It's largely forgotten, however, in the sea of amazing plays that were yet to come. Now, I do want to take a little bit of time to play a few quick segments from the radio broadcast of this game. Joe Garagiola's commentary is simply classic. Take these clips about Louis Tiant's delivery, for example.
Slow curveball, that Lollapalooza pitch that he throws at the big American Legion roundhouse as kids where you put your thumb out, bite your tongue, and throw it. Tiant, it defies description. It's almost like Gene Mock talking about Dick Hall. He looks like a drunk falling off a bar stool. He's going in all different directions as he delivers the plate. He delivers like he's put together with Scotch tape and hinges.
As good as the television broadcast of this game is, in my opinion, the radio broadcast is even better. It might be because I prefer the witty Joe Garagiola to the dry and businesslike Curt Gowdy. Let me know what you think. The thing I can't get over when I watch this game is how much fun it was to watch Tiant pitch. And then there were pitches like this that don't really belong in a World Series. It was quiet after that play in the first, though Carlton Fisk put some lift into this one. And then it was back to the Louis Tiant show. Joe Morgan got the first hit for the Reds. In fact, he was their first base runner. That's how good Tiant was pitching. Now, Tiant's throw to first was famous and had everybody guessing what was going to happen. Reds manager Sparky Anderson made a point of claiming that Tiant's move to first was a balk long before the series began. Darrell Johnson, the Red Sox manager, apparently thought that everybody was on the same page. Well, Tiant's first throw to first base was ruled fine. So was his second throw. Morgan was clearly safe here. And then a balk was called. Tony Kubek in the NBC booth made a point out of saying that Tiant might have thrown before he moved his legs. but he clearly didn't. It shouldn't have been called a balk. After an at-bat that felt like an eternity, Johnny Bench finally popped up. Now, I'm not the only one who thought it was slow. Garagiola thought the same thing.
This is getting about as exciting as watch that concrete dry. And the grass grow. And the grass grow.
Morgan threatened to steal third and did all he could to distract Tiant. In the end, though, Tiant got the big strikeout. The Red Sox threatened again, but Johnny Bench threw out Rick Burleson as he tried to steal second. You know, I'm not entirely sure I understand why the Red Sox were running so much, what with that green monster and all. You'd think they'd be a little more content to sit back and swing from the heels, you know, the way that they did back in 1949, but oh well. However, nobody could touch Tiant's stuff. You can see here just how confused the hitters were. Ken Griffey Sr. wasn't, though. This came very close to a home run. But then Tiant finished Griffey up. With first base open, the Red Sox passed Cesar Geronimo to get to picture Don Gullett. And that turned out to be the right decision. And then the Tiant show continued. With one out in the bottom of the fifth, Tiant received a standing ovation for fouling a ball off. But then Tiant worked hard to run the count full. And then Gullett lost him. In fact, Gullett was showing all sorts of control problems. He went 2-0 on Dwight Evans, the next hitter, before getting him to pop out. Denny Doyle managed to single, however, bringing up Yastrzemski with 2 on and 2 out. But Yaz grounded out to end the inning. Now, if you want to see how good the fielding was, check out this throw by Evans that almost caught Joe Morgan at second base. It's simply amazing. Rico Petrocelli at third did a good job holding Morgan on at second here. And then Tiant showed that nobody could hit his slow curve. It was still scoreless as this game went to the bottom of the sixth. This was a classic game one that we've sadly forgotten about. With 1 out, Fred Lynn singled. He was followed by Petrocelli. The Reds then walked Rick Burleson intentionally, loading up the bases to pitch to Cecil Cooper, which sounds crazy to me. But then Cesar Geronimo made this absolutely amazing double play. Yeah, it was that kind of series already. Tiant, though, continued to look unhittable. And when the Reds did manage to hit it, they had to deal with catches like this. George Foster was on first base, but was thrown out trying to steal second. Do you think they got him? Well, it's more clear from this angle. This pitch elicited oohs and ahs from the crowd, but Griffey hit it for a double. Foster might have scored if he hadn't been caught stealing. They walked Geronimo intentionally for the second time in a row to get to Gullett. Gullett got good wood on the ball, but Doyle made a great play at second. That brings us to the bottom of the seventh inning, still scoreless. It's been the Louis Tiant show so far, and it's only going to get better. Tiant was swinging like he was Babe Ruth. But then it came, a changeup that he could easily deal with. You can see that Tiant stepped into the bucket here, but it doesn't matter, a hit is a hit. Evans decided to bunt Tiant over to second base, and then Gullett wound up throwing the ball into center field. Now, Tiant doesn't exactly look like a graceful base runner, does he? Doyle bluffed a bunt and then swung away with an 0-1 count. He was trying to open up a hole on the left side. And it worked. That loaded the bases with nobody out. Yaz swung with all his might but missed. And then Yaz connected. Tiant scored the first run, though he forgot to touch the plate. The Reds missed a chance for yet another controversial play here. You can clearly see here that Tiant didn't even come close to touching the plate the first time.
We got a chance. Now, Louis. Hey, wait a second. Concepcion anyway doesn't think I...
Down 1-0, Cincinnati brought on Clay Carroll to put out the fire. He proceeded to walk Carlton Fisk to force home another run. Will McEnany came up next for Cincinnati. He kept shaking Bench off here. I guess he knew what he was doing. Yeah, apparently he had a plan.
And he swings and misses for strike 3.
However, Petrocelli singled, driving in 2 more to make it 4-0 Boston.
Doyle scores. They're going to send Yastrzemski. Here's the throw to the plate. It's cut off.
Then Burleson singled, making it 5-0.
Base hit left field. Fisk coming around. Here's the throw to the plate. And scoring is Fisk going to second.
Cecil Cooper hit a sacrifice fly to make it a 6-run inning. The wind just barely kept that one in the park.
On the warning track, makes the catch. Both runners will tag. Petrocelli scores. Burleson.
And then Louis Tiant popped up to end the inning over 20 minutes after he singled to lead it off. Tiant had beautiful stuff that day.
Morgan a single and a bunch. Takes strike 1.
He had some help from his fielders as well.
And lines this first pitch to center field. Freddie Lynn.
Petrocelli made a great play to end it.
And Petrocelli gloves it. The throw in time.
But the story of this game was all about Tiant. Well, there you have it. Now, Game 1 of the 75 series is usually considered to be the ugly duckling of the series. Personally, I think it's underrated. But you want to stay tuned because we're going to go through the rest one game at a time, and we're going to go through all of the stories and all of the controversy.